There was a time when bread turned to mud, when the skies cried too long and the fields refused to grow. It was the year 1315, and Europe was starving. No crops, no cattle, no hope. Villagers boiled grass for soup. Mothers rocked silent cribs. And somewhere in the woods, someone chewed on something that wasn't quite animal. This wasn't a tale of war or conquest. This was the Great Famine, when hunger turned men into monsters. Tonight, we're going back to the century of rot, rain, and ruin, where bones weren't just buried, they were boiled. And history got very, very hungry. Welcome to 1315. Before we begin, please like the video and comment below where you're from and what time it is. I'll like every one of your comments. Now, dim your lights, grab your blanket, and close your eyes. You wake to the drumming of rain on a thatched roof. It's not a gentle patter, but a relentless torrent, as if the sky has forgotten how to stop crying. Water leaks through the straw above and taps onto your forehead. A cold morning kiss from a merciless sky. You pull a threadbare wool blanket tighter around your shoulders. It's damp. Everything is damp these days, and it carries the smell of mildew and smoke. Your stomach rumbles, a familiar emptiness gnawing at your insides. In better times, dawn brought the scent of barley porridge or fresh bread. Today, it brings only the sour odor of wet earth. You sit up on your pallet of hay and look around your one-room hut. In the gray light, you see your two children still asleep, if hunger-induced exhaustion counts as sleep. Their cheeks are hollow, and their little limbs stick out from the blankets. Even in slumber, their faces pinch with discomfort. You try to remember the last time any of you went to bed with a full belly. It must have been late winter when you finished the last of the stored grain. Spring was supposed to bring renewal. Instead, it brought ruin. The rains began in April, just as you planted the seed grain saved from last year's meager harvest. At first, everyone welcomed the rain after a dry March. A farmer always hopes for a good soaking after sowing. But the good soaking never stopped. April became May, and still it rained. Fields turned to swamps. Young green shoots drowned in mud or grew stunted and yellow. By May's end, you knew the harvest would be bad. You just didn't know how bad. You slog through the mud outside to check on the little patch of wheat you planted. What should be a sea of green stalks is a patchy mess. Many sprouts have rotted at the root. Those that survived stand weak and spindly, as if apologizing for their existence. You gently tug at one stalk. It comes right out, its roots slimy and black. The plant flops in your hand like a wet rag. You can't even muster anger. Only a dull despair settles in your gut, mixing with hunger. Your neighbor trudges by on the flooded village lane, a sack over his shoulder. Through the curtain of rain, he gives you a grim nod. He's likely heading to the manor house to beg the Lord's steward for seed or food. You both know there's little to spare. The Lord's granary was half empty after last year's scant yields, and now much of the spring sowing is ruined. As he disappears into the gray sheets of rain, you look around at your little hamlet. What once was a cheerful cluster of cottages and barns now looks like a drab painting soaked and smeared with water. Smoke from a few chimneys barely rises before the rain beats it down. You pass by a neighbor's hut and see the family inside through the open door, huddled around a small fire, eyes hollow, likely boiling nettles or scraping out the last bits of grain from a barrel. No aroma of fresh bread or hearty stew wafts through the village now, only the odor of damp wood and despair. The very few animals left are in pitiable shape. A gaunt pig stands in a pen of muck, shivering. A pair of scrawny chickens perch miserably under the eaves, feathers soaked. Even the village dogs skulk about, ribs showing, sniffing for any crumb. The normal sounds of village life, laughing children, scolding mothers, barking dogs, the ring of the smith's hammer, have all faded into the monotony of rain and the occasional wail of a hungry infant. This is the new normal, you realize with dread. By June, hope is washing away. The rain continues, an endless, dreary curtain that turns roads into rivers and fields into lakes. Travelers bring stories from neighboring villages. It's the same everywhere. Waterlogged fields, rotting seedlings, hungry faces. One traveler, a peddler who shares your fire one evening, though you have no food to share in return, tells you that even the king has noticed the failed crops. King Edward's men are setting price limits on grain and meat, the peddler says, hugging his thin cloak to his shoulders as rain hammers the roof. 12 shillings for a fat cow, a penny for 2 dozen eggs, by royal decree. You let out a hollow laugh. A penny for 2 dozen eggs? You haven't seen an egg in weeks. Your own hens stopped laying, stressed by the relentless wet and lack of feed. And a fat cow? Most cows in the village are gaunt or dead by now. Price limits mean nothing if there's simply no food to buy. The peddler shrugs, acknowledging the absurdity. Aye, they mean well, but you can't buy what doesn't exist, he mutters. In truth, the king's decree has only made things worse. Merchants hoard what little grain remains, unwilling to sell at the low fixed prices. Markets fall silent. A royal proclamation can't fill empty bellies, and it can't stop the rain. Early July. The village priest, Father Bernard, leads a somber procession through the mire that used to be the main road. You and your neighbors trudge behind him, heads bowed, feet sloshing through muddy puddles. It's a rogation procession, a plea to God for mercy on the crops. By order of the Archbishop of Canterbury, every parish in the realm is holding such solemn processions, hoping a united prayer might persuade the heavens. Father Bernard chants supplications that nearly drown in the sound of drumming rain. Spare us, O Lord, hear our cry. The procession circles the flooded fields. You clutch your wife's hand. Her fingers are icy. Or is that just the rain? She squeezes back, and you wonder if her silent prayer is the same as yours. Please, just let it stop. But the heavens aren't in a bargaining mood. If anything, the rain falls harder that week, as if mocking your prayers. Thunder rumbles in the distance like an empty stomach. A few villagers curse under their breath despite the priest's presence. One old man spits into the field, muttering that God must be sleeping or dead. Father Bernard shoots him a warning glare but says nothing. Even the clergy are beginning to doubt what sin could warrant a punishment like this. By August, normally the start of harvest, the situation is clear as a sunny day. If only you could remember what sun looks like. The crops have failed, completely. The stalks that survived the floods are blighted or empty of grain, their leaves blackened and slimy. When your village finally manages a scant harvest, It's not even a quarter of the usual yield. The wheat, oats, and rye you gather would barely feed the village for a month, let alone until next year. For every 2 seeds you planted in spring, you've reaped maybe 1 scrawny grain. It's a net loss so absurd it would be funny if it weren't so tragic. Sowing those seeds was like depositing coins that the earth simply swallowed up, giving you back a refund of mud and rot. Even the garden patches have fared poorly. The few carrots and cabbages that sprouted are small and bitter, or else drowned by the floods. There will be almost no winter stores of vegetables or fodder either. At the harvest reckoning, the village elders count up the meager stores and grain owed to the Lord. The mood in the alehouse, where the counting is done, is grim. Old Gregory, who is nearing 70 and has seen many seasons, shakes his head and says, "Not in my lifetime has it ever been this bad. We had a lean year back in 90, aye, but nothing like this, nothing like this." Others mutter agreement. In past hard times, maybe one crop failed, but another succeeded, or a neighboring region could spare a bit. This year, it seems, the misery is everywhere, and no one can come to our aid. The steward of the manor arrives to collect the Lord's share of grain tax, but after seeing the paltry heap on the table, he leaves with only a fraction of what was due. There's simply nothing to take. The Lord will not be pleased, but short of squeezing blood from a stone, he must accept that his peasants cannot give what they don't have. Whispers circulate that even in the king's court the tables are bare. You hear a story that King Edward II himself traveled to the abbey at St. Albans this summer, and his hosts could hardly find bread to serve him. Imagine, a king with no bread. The thought would be amusing if it didn't underscore how dire things are. When royalty goes hungry, what chance do simple peasants have? People in the alehouse exchange nervous whispers. Surely this is more than just bad luck. Some wonder aloud if God is punishing the land for our sins, or perhaps for the misdeeds of lords and kings. It's dangerous to blame a king for anything, but hunger breeds boldness in gossip. Others shake their heads and say it's simply nature's whim gone cruelly awry. In any case, no amount of finger-pointing produces a single loaf of bread. Each day you wake and perform the same ritual. Check the sky, still slate gray. Check the dirt, still sodden. Check your belly, still empty. By now, your life revolves around the search for food. Normal work on the land has ceased. What's the point of tilling fields that won't yield? Instead, the village spends its days scouring for anything remotely edible. Mushrooms in the forest, mostly too waterlogged and worm-eaten to bother. Wild berries, a rare treat. Their bushes have been flooded or picked clean. You strip bark from young birch trees, scraping out the soft inner layer. Boiled long enough, it makes a bitter paste that can quiet the stomach pangs for a few hours. It's a terrible excuse for nutrition, but it's that, or eat nothing at all. One afternoon, you catch your young son trying to eat mud. He's scooped a handful as if it were porridge, his dirt-caked fingers bringing it to his cracked lips. You shout and lunge to stop him, but not before he gags on the gritty mouthful. He retches, spitting out the sludge, then starts to whimper weakly. You immediately regret yelling. It wasn't anger, it was fear. In that moment, seeing your child so desperate, something inside you breaks a little. A mix of sorrow and a dark, creeping horror. If this continues, what will you all be driven to do? That night, you gather your family by the hearth. The fire is small. Firewood is hard to find dry, and you're too fatigued to go far for it. In the dim flicker of embers, you dole out the day's meal, a wooden bowl of boiled weeds and moss. It's mostly warm water with a handful of whatever greenery you could scavenge from the marshy ground. Greenish-brown, stringy, more swamp than soup. You hand the first bowl to your wife. She hesitates. Her pride always made her serve everyone else before herself when times were better. But now she's too tired to protest. The children get theirs next, and you last. You raise a spoon to your lips and take a sip. Warm, murky water, tinged with chlorophyll and mud. The boiled moss slithers down your throat. It tastes like sadness. It tastes like a wet dog smells. You force yourself to swallow. If despair had a flavor, this would be it. Delicious, you joke quietly, attempting gallows humor. 5-star cuisine. Your wife manages a weak chuckle. The children are too busy gagging down the stew to react. Dark humor is all you have left. Laughing at your misery is a tiny rebellion against it. Outside, the rain finally stops, but not because of some merciful turn in the weather. It's just the chill of autumn settling in. The seasonal rains taper off in late September. By then, the damage is done. Now, a new threat creeps in with the first frosts. Cold. Usually, after harvest, you'd have full granaries and well-fed bodies to endure winter's bite. Now, you have neither. You've patched the roof as best you can, stuffing straw and rags into the larger gaps to slow the leaks and drafts. But hunger makes the cold sharper. With no fat on your bones, the wind seems to blow straight through you. Winter arrives early. By November's end, snow flurries dance across fields that never yielded grain. What was mud now hardens into ice. In a sense, you're grateful. At least with the ground frozen, you're not sinking knee-deep whenever you walk. But winter brings its own set of miseries. The cold is unrelenting. By mid-December, a crust of ice glazes the inside of your hut's small window at dawn. Your breath hangs in the air even indoors. At night, your family sleeps huddled together on the straw pallet, sharing what little body heat you have. You pile every spare cloth and hide on top of yourselves, tattered cloaks, threadbare blankets, even sackcloth. Yet some nights you still wake up trembling. With so little food, your bodies have no fuel to fend off the chill. It's as though the cold finds a home in your very bones. The hunger that gnawed in autumn becomes a constant torment in the cold. You're burning through whatever scraps you had left. Dried nettle leaves, a few wrinkled wild turnips pulled too early from the ground, even acorns you gathered and soaked and pounded into an awful paste. The tannins made your mouth pucker. The acorn mush gave your whole family horrible stomach aches, but at least it was something in the belly. Sometimes you dream of food. It's the cruelest trick. You dream of tearing into a warm loaf of bread, of biting an apple and feeling the juice run down your chin. You dream of roasted meat, sizzling and spitting over a fire. In your dream, you feast until you're heavy and happy. But then you wake up, stomach cramping, mouth dry, an ache in your chest that's more heartbreak than hunger. Those first moments of waking, when reality crashes back in, are the worst. Your wife has taken to wetting a cloth and letting the children suck on it, just to give them the sensation of something in their mouths. It quiets them for a short while. You tried it too, once. Closed your eyes and pretended the cold water was oily broth trickling down your throat. It helped about as much as you'd expect, which is to say, not at all. One frigid January night, in a bout of desperation, you cut a strip of leather from an old harness and boil it for hours. The hide softens just enough to gnaw. You force yourself to choke down a few charred, rubbery strips. It tastes like bitter dirt and hair, but at least it fills your belly for that night. You've literally begun eating your boots. On All Hallows' Eve, Halloween, you attend a candlelit mass in the church. The air inside the stone chapel is heavy with incense and the sound of subdued weeping. Father Bernard gives a sermon about Job's trials and the manna from heaven, urging everyone to keep faith that God will provide. His voice carries through the cold air as he recounts how the faithful Job suffered every loss imaginable, yet never cursed the Lord. He reminds all of us of the Israelites wandering hungry in the desert until God sent manna from heaven. Our Lord hears our cries, he insists, raising his hands over the small congregation. As he provided for his children in the wilderness, so too will he provide for us in this, our time of tribulation. We must remain steadfast in faith and in charity to one another. A few villagers murmur, "Amen," though others stare at the floor, unconvinced. You shift your weight on aching legs, wishing faith alone could fill stomachs. Still, Father Bernard's conviction is almost contagious. You cling to his words like a lifeline, hoping he's right that relief will come, though day by day it's harder to believe. You stand in the back because the pews are filled with the frail and sick who can't stand long. A few babies mule in their mother's arms, thin, pitiful cries. You notice one mother gently rocking a bundle that doesn't make a sound at all. You realize with a chill that the bundle is a swaddled corpse. Her infant died that morning, but she hasn't the strength or will to bury him yet, so she clings to his little body as she prays. The sight turns your stomach and tightens your throat. You've seen death before. Everyone has. But seldom something as heartbreaking as a mother outliving her newborn, here in the house of God. Walking home in darkness, you hold your little girl's hand tightly. She is 5, barely more than a baby herself. You can feel her bones through her tiny fingers. She stumbles from weariness, and you scoop her into your arms despite your own fatigue. She's light as a bird. You silently beg whatever power might be listening, please, not her. Take me, take my crops, take anything but not my children. The night is cold, but you press her against your chest, sharing what meager warmth you have as you carry her back to your hut. Above, the sky is finally clear. The stars glitter with pitiless beauty, as if nothing is wrong on the earth below. New Year's Day, 1316 arrives with pale sunlight that gives no warmth. With the turn of the calendar, you dare to hope the curse has lifted. Surely it can't be as bad again, you tell your wife, forcing optimism into your voice. She nods silently, her eyes too exhausted to show any spark of hope. Neither of you wants to voice the fear that the worst is yet to come. In January, the rain returns. Cold, sleety, miserable drizzle alternating with wet snow. It seeps through the patched roof, turning your dirt floor back into a slick mess. Whatever meager winter stores you had are dwindling fast. A few villagers have already succumbed to starvation. An old widow down the lane was found in her bed one morning, stiff and still, her lips blue. They said she simply fell asleep and didn't wake up. In truth, it was a gentler death than many will face this year. By midwinter, foraging parties venture farther from the village in search of food. You join one such expedition in early February. 5 of you set out, wrapped in every rag and scrap of fur available. Your ribs stick out under layers of threadbare tunics, making you look like scarecrows on the move. You carry knives and sacks, and a desperation that drives you beyond caution. In normal times, wandering too far into the woods could mean getting lost, or stumbling into a wolf pack's territory, or crossing onto a neighboring lord's land and being accused of poaching. But these aren't normal times. Frankly, you'd wrestle a wolf for a scrap of meat today, and as for lords and boundaries, hunger pays no heed to such things. The forest is eerily quiet. Even the animals seem to be in hiding, as if they know gaunt humans mean danger. You find little. Some frozen berries on a holly bush, bitter, likely poisonous. You leave them. A half-rotten tree stump yields a handful of slimy mushrooms. One of your companions eyes them with suspicion. Death caps, he warns. Eat those, and you'll see tomorrow from your grave. Grudgingly, you toss them aside. You're hungry, not suicidal, at least not yet. After hours of trudging through brambles and bare trees, you come upon a scrawny rabbit caught in a snare. Someone's forgotten trap from better days. It's half dead, shivering, and skeletal, but it's meat. Your group falls upon it almost in disbelief at your luck. No one cares whose trap it was. Finders, keepers in the wild law of famine. One man swiftly breaks the rabbit's neck to end its suffering. At least one of God's creatures will have a full belly tonight. Too hungry to wait until you return to the village, you build a small fire in the lee of a rock and roast the rabbit on a spit. The smell of cooking flesh, thin and gamey as it is, makes your mouths water uncontrollably. When the meat is barely cooked, who can spare the patience for a thorough roast? You divvy it up. It amounts to a few mouthfuls each. You get a portion of stringy leg muscle and a nibble of liver. It's the richest thing you've tasted in months. A tear actually rolls down your cheek as you chew slowly, savoring the juices. It tastes like life itself. For a few minutes, the warmth of real protein in your stomach makes you feel almost human again. Back in the village that evening, you share a sliver of the rabbit meat with your family. You'd carefully wrapped a piece in a leaf and tucked it in your shirt. It's not even a bite for each of them. More of a tease than a meal, but you couldn't not share. Watching your little boy gum eagerly at the shred of meat is both heartening and heartbreaking. It's gone so fast. Your son licks his lips and asks in a tiny voice, "More?" You have to shake your head and pat his back softly, feeling both pride that you brought them a taste of nourishment and anguish that you couldn't bring more. Weeks creep by. Each day is a copy of the last. Gray, cold, hungry. You wake in the pre-dawn gloom, too hungry to sleep soundly anyway. You check on your children, still breathing, still asleep, thank God. Then set about the daily, joyless tasks. First, coax the meager fire back to life using brambles or peat if you have it. There's no wood left. It was all burned or traded for food long ago. You sip a bit of warm water. You'd call it tea to the children, though it's just boiled mint and rainwater, to stave off the morning chills. With nothing to eat, you head out to search. Every day you roam a little farther, combing the hedgerows for any overlooked berries, long gone, digging in thawed patches of earth for edible roots or earthworms, even venturing into abandoned cottages nearby in case some forgotten crust or pickled vegetable remains hidden. By noon, you are light-headed and weary. Sometimes you return home empty-handed and hang your head as the children ask hopefully if you found anything. On a luckier day, you might drop a handful of sorrel leaves or a scrawny wild turnip onto the table. Hardly a feast, but something. The rest of the day is spent in a numb haze of conserving energy. You tell stories or sing softly, just to keep the children's minds off their hunger. When night falls, the stomach pains are worst. You tighten your belt or a piece of rope around your waist, an old trick to lessen hunger pangs by pressure. Sleep comes fitfully, punctuated by dreams of food and nightmares of doom, and then the merciless cycle repeats with the next gray dawn. People are growing desperate. Some begin to leave, striking out on the road in hopes of finding relief elsewhere. One morning you wake to find the family in the next cottage gone. The father had said something the night before about heading south, where he heard rumors of milder weather and food. Many doubt those rumors. Bad weather covers all of northern Europe, if the travelers are to be believed. But when you're starving, even the faintest whisper of hope can send you wandering. In early March, your friend Thomas, the blacksmith, decides he can't watch his family die doing nothing. He packs up his wife and 2 teenage sons. You watch at dawn as they load a handcart with the few possessions they have strength to carry. Thomas's plan is to reach the nearest town, maybe St. Albans or even London, thinking the cities might have stockpiles of grain or charitable aid from the church. You and others try to dissuade him. Cities are hungry too, and often bar their gates against a flood of beggars. But Thomas is resolute. "I can't just sit here and watch my family starve," he says, voice breaking. As they depart in the dim light, you notice the sons carrying makeshift spears. It's not wild animals they fear on the road, not exactly. It's other people just as desperate as themselves. Sure enough, a few weeks later, one of Thomas's sons limps back into the village alone. He's gaunt, hollow-eyed, with a nasty gash across his forehead. He collapses by our fire, and between sobs and gasps, he tells the tale. "The thieves on the road," he stammers. "They came out of nowhere, demanded our food. We had none to give." His voice cracks. "Father tried to fight. They beat him, left him for dead. Mother grabbed my brother and ran." He wipes his eyes with a filthy sleeve, smearing tears over his hollow cheeks. "I lost them in the dark," he whispers. "I don't know if they got away. I don't know." We exchange grim glances as he dissolves into tears. Thomas, strong, sturdy Thomas, was the closest thing our village had to a protector. If even he fell to desperation's violence, none of us are safe. The young man, Thomas's older son, is feverish and weak. Despite our own shortage, what villagers remain take him in and nurse him as best we can. But with so little to offer, a bit of boiled willow bark for pain, some boiled water to keep him hydrated. You fear he survived the ambush only to succumb to infection or exhaustion here. Indeed, his wound festers, and within a week the poor lad succumbs to the fever. Another grave is dug in ground, still half frozen. Such stories multiply. Refugees from other villages pass by from time to time, each with their own nightmares. One group speaks of an entire hamlet abandoned, houses standing empty and quiet as graves because the people all left or died. Another traveler, a lone woman with sunken cheeks and a wild look in her eye, mutters about mothers abandoning babies and corpses along every road. She carries a sack protectively. When someone asks what's inside, she just cackles and hugs it tighter. You fear hunger has driven her mad. Some people's bodies survive, but their minds falter under the relentless strain. Not everyone can remain sane through such horrors. Food prices, for what little is traded, have skyrocketed beyond imagining. A small loaf of bread now costs what a whole cow might have 2 years ago. At the rare market stall still operating, a penny might buy you 2 withered onions, if you can find a seller at all. Not that you have coins anyway. As a peasant, you mostly barter, and now you have nothing to trade. Money has become almost meaningless at the village level. You can't eat coins, and no one with food wants your few pennies unless they can turn around and somehow use them to get even more expensive supplies. Those who do have something left to sell or barter are in danger. Thieves lurk on the edges of society, waiting to take by force what they can't get by honest means. Indeed, theft has come even to your little community. It started with grain stores being pilfered at night. In February, someone broke into the church and stole the Holy Communion wafers and wine, perhaps thinking it was real food. Father Bernard was furious at the sacrilege, but also pitied the thief's desperation. A week later, a pig, one of the last in the village, vanished from its pen. Its owner, a yeoman farmer, found only blood spatters and drag marks in the mud leading toward the woods. Likely that pig became a midnight feast for someone. After that, people started standing guard or sleeping in shifts, but we are all so weak it's hard to stay vigilant. One night, you catch an intruder at your own cottage. It's past midnight. Your family is curled together on the straw bed for warmth. You awake to the faint creak of your door. Moonlight from a rare clear sky reveals a skinny figure creeping inside. Your heart lurches. You have no grain or livestock to steal, just a couple of wooden bowls and a rusty sickle, nothing of value. In a flash, you realize he's here for the only thing you do have left. The soup cauldron simmering over the low fire with tonight's thin broth of weeds, which is still mostly just water. Sure enough, the dark shape moves toward the pot. Perhaps he thought you all asleep or dead. With a surge of adrenaline, you shout and leap up. The intruder, startled, stumbles back. In the half-light, you see it's Adam, a local man who once tended sheep on the manor. You barely recognize him now that his face is gaunt and wolfish. Please, just a sip, he rasps, not even bothering with a lie. His eyes are fixed on the pot behind you. In the bed, your children wake and start whimpering, frightened by the commotion. You grab your old sickle, brandishing it with unsteady hands. "Get out," you croak, your voice rough. You don't want to hurt him. Adam was a friend once, but you will if you must. That pitiful pot of broth might keep your family alive one more day. You can't spare a drop. Adam hesitates. In the fire's embers, you see tears on his face cutting through the dirt. "My wife, she's dying," he whispers. "She hasn't eaten in—" His voice trails off. He takes another step forward, hands trembling. You catch the sour-sweet odor of his breath, the scent of an empty belly digesting itself. It's a smell you know from your own family. In that moment, you see a mirror of your own possible fate. For a heartbeat, your resolve wavers. Your wife places a hand on your back, grounding you. If you give away your food, then your family might be the one dying next. Choking on guilt and fury at fate, you advance with the sickle. "I'm sorry," you manage to say. Adam's shoulders sag. He turns and flees into the night, a quiet sob escaping as he vanishes into darkness. You collapse back to the floor, shaking, half ashamed and half relieved you didn't have to actually strike him. The children sob softly. There are no more thoughts of sleep. You spend the rest of the night staring into the weak fire, arms around your family, wondering what kind of monsters this hunger is turning all of you into. And yet, even in this darkness, there are glimmers of humanity that refuse to be extinguished. You think of old Widow Marjorie down the lane, who quietly left a bowl of broth at the doorstep of a neighbor's sick children, even when she had barely anything for herself. She passed away the next week, God rest her soul, but those children survived. And of the village herbal woman, who used the last of her precious honey to brew a soothing drink for everyone plagued by cough and flux, easing their misery, if not their hunger. Small sacrifices, small kindnesses, rare and precious, flickering candles in the night of famine. Hunger may have turned many into thieves and fiends, but a few became unexpected saints. In the darkest times, a handful of souls still share and care, keeping the spark of decency alive. By spring planting season of 1316, you face an impossible dilemma, the seed grain dilemma. A small sack of barley seeds sits in the corner of your hut, precious, the last of last year's saved seed. Normally, these seeds would be planted now, in hopes of a summer crop. But your family hasn't eaten a real meal you can't even remember. Those seeds could perhaps make a few loaves of coarse bread if ground and baked. If you sow them, you might have a harvest months from now, if the weather cooperates this year. If you eat them now, you won't starve this week, but then you'll have nothing to plant, guaranteeing the starvation continues later. It's a cruel gamble. Feed the present at the cost of the future, or sacrifice the present for a chance at a future. At a village meeting, this quandary is discussed heatedly. Some argue for planting whatever we can, that we must hold out hope for a better harvest this year. Others say it's pointless to plant if we're all going to die before harvest time anyway. In the end, each household must choose for itself. Father Bernard implores everyone to have faith and sow the fields, trusting God will provide sun when needed this time. Given God's recent track record, plenty are skeptical. You decide to compromise. You plant half the seed and keep half to eat in emergencies. It feels like a huge risk either way. After the sowing is done, with earth hopefully hiding your future salvation, you realize you have nothing left to feed your family until those crops come in. In early April, as a last resort, you undertake a journey to a nearby monastery, hoping the Holy Brothers might have mercy, or at least some stored grain. The road to St. Mary's Abbey is a day's walk. Along the way, you pass gaunt figures shuffling in the opposite direction. Other supplicants who have already been to the abbey. Some carry a small loaf or a flask of weak broth given as alms. Others got nothing and wear despair like a burial shroud. When you arrive at the abbey gates, a tragic scene greets you. Dozens of beggars camped outside, mothers with listless children, and even an abandoned newborn left wailing on the doorstep. Old men stand silently with eyes that beg louder than their voices. The monks ladle out meager gruel to those they can, but their supplies are clearly running low, too. You wait in line for hours, knees shaking. When your turn comes, a young monk looks at you apologetically and scrapes the bottom of a cauldron to give you a half bowl of watery oatmeal and a chunk of coarse rye bread. "God be with you," he says softly as he hands it over, his own thin face showing he understands your plight. You wolf down the lukewarm gruel right there in the courtyard, trying not to seem ungrateful. The bread you tuck away for your children. Before leaving, you slip into the abbey church to pray. The chapel is plain, but at least it's dry and carries an air of peace. You kneel and whisper a plea not so much for a miracle, just for endurance. A kindly abbot pats your shoulder and murmurs, "We all suffer this trial together, my son." He mentions that even the Holy Father in Avignon has ordered prayers and penances across Christendom to plead for relief, and that the great Canterbury Cathedral has parted with some of its holy relics to raise money for grain. "Hold firm and feed your little ones," he advises, noticing the bread you tucked away. You walk back home with heavy legs but a lighter spirit. At least tonight your children will have a morsel of real bread. That small mercy feels like a victory. Spring 1316 is marginally better than the last. The rains are still frequent, but there are occasional breaks. A few sunny days in April give everyone a fragile flutter of optimism. The fields you sowed have green shoots again, thin and sparse but alive. You weed and tend them with devotion, as if caring for an ill child. Meanwhile, wild plants are coming back as the weather warms, and you forage dandelion greens and nettles for some vitamins. The fresh greens help keep scurvy at bay. Not that you know the word scurvy, but you know that without something besides grain, gums bleed and teeth loosen. Some in the village suffer that already. But just as the earth shows signs of healing, a new affliction strikes. A deadly sickness sweeps through the livestock. In April, cows and sheep across the region are stricken with murrain, a highly contagious plague that makes animals stagger and foam at the mouth before collapsing. The few remaining cows in your village, already weakened from scant fodder, succumb one by one. You wake up one morning to the sound of your neighbor weeping. His last ox, the one that somehow plowed our spring fields, lies dead in the stall. Desperate not to waste the meat, a group of you helps butcher the carcass at once. The smell is foul. The animal was diseased. But hunger drives everyone to take a share of the beef. Your wife boils what little you receive into a stew. It's the richest meal you've had in ages, but it comes with a price. Within a day, several who ate that meat fall ill with vomiting and fever. The flesh was tainted, and without enough salt or spices to properly preserve or purify it, it only spreads sickness. You manage to stomach it without falling gravely ill, though you endure cramps and a day of misery. After this, few dare to eat the fallen beasts. Instead, the dead animals are dragged off and buried. It's a heartbreaking sight. Bones that should have been sustenance, consigned to the earth because even in starvation the meat couldn't be safely eaten. By early May, hunger continues to tighten its grip, but nature offers occasional small gifts. One May afternoon, you even manage to catch a few small fish in the stream nearby. Normally, the stream is a trickle, but with all the rain it's swollen and murky, not ideal for fishing. Yet, by some fortune, you spot trout that have made it into a flooded creek offshoot, now trapped in a shrinking pool as waters recede between rains. You and a neighbor wade in and scoop out 3 flimsy trout with your bare hands. Victory. That night, you actually have a semblance of a real meal. Fish roasted over coals, seasoned with wild garlic leaves. The flesh is insubstantial and bony, but oh, the savory taste of fat and salt from the fish's natural oils feels like a king's banquet. You feel strength returning to your limbs just from that one meal. It lifts your spirits for days. However, brighter moments are quickly overshadowed by dark news. Along with spring's tentative renewal comes more travelers, and more tales of horror from farther afield. It's not just isolated criminals, even organized armies are on the move. You hear mutters of ongoing conflict. King Edward's forces clash with King Robert Bruce's Scots in the north, and war also rages in distant Flanders and Germany. War and famine, hand in hand, like 2 riders of the apocalypse. You even hear a rumor from across the sea in Ireland. A castle garrison, trapped by war and hunger, supposedly resorted to eating the dead to stay alive. Famine makes monsters of everyone, it seems, no matter if one wears a crown, a cross, or rags. In mid-1316, a band of the king's knights comes to the village. They arrive unexpectedly one afternoon. 3 riders on half-starved horses, pennants hanging limp in the damp air. They are an intimidating sight. Armored men on horseback, splattered with mud. Through the grime on their surcoats, you discern the emblem of the local earl. They call for the headman. We gather around, uneasy. The horses stamp and huff, looking skeletal themselves. You can count a warhorse's ribs these days, too. One of the knights unrolls a parchment and loudly reads a proclamation. It's from the king's officials, demanding that any surplus food must be reported and sent to market for fair distribution, and warning that hoarding grain is a crime punishable by severe penalty. Surplus food. The phrase would be laughable if it weren't so insulting, as if we're hiding mountains of grain somewhere. Next, the knight announces that due to the famine, this year's taxes will be postponed. Not forgiven, mind you, just postponed. The Lord is not entirely heartless. He knows we can't give what we don't have. He'll collect when times are better, if they ever are. That, at least, is a small relief. We won't have to fend off tax collectors on top of everything. The knights also bring a cart of supplies. We crane our necks as 2 squires pull back a canvas tarp, revealing a few sacks of grain and some barrels of salted fish. It's meager aid, sent either by the king or the earl or the church. Who cares who? All you see is food. It's not nearly enough to feed the whole village more than a day or 2, but at this point, any charity is a blessing. The headman, with Father Bernard's help, portions out the sacks. Each family gets a share according to size. Your family of 4 receives a small sack of barley and 2 salted herrings. You feel almost giddy with gratitude. As the knights prepare to depart, you overhear one speaking quietly to Father Bernard. "This is all we could bring," the knight says with a weary sigh. His Majesty has sent ships to import grain from wherever possible, but little has made it through. One large Genoese merchant ship loaded with wheat for England was captured by pirates last month. God curse them. Others never left port at all. Everyone from here to the Baltic is starving. The priest thanks him regardless, and with that grim update, the riders move on to the next stricken hamlet. Only a few weeks later, another messenger from the Lord arrives, this time not with food, but with a call to arms. King Edward, it seems, still requires soldiers for his wars against the Scots, and there are whispers of unrest in distant France as well. The bailiff stands in the village square and reads a decree ordering every able man to be ready for military service. You and the other remaining young men exchange incredulous glances. It's a cruel joke. Hardly anyone here has the strength to hold a sword, let alone march off to battle. One fellow, trying to be dutiful, steps forward to volunteer, but he's so emaciated that the bailiff quickly waves him off, muttering that an army of skeletons would be of no use on the battlefield. The messenger leaves in frustration, having found no recruits in your village. The war must go on without us. We're too busy fighting our own enemy, hunger. That night, you cook some of the barley into a thick porridge, using precious firewood to boil it slowly to tenderness. The smell draws neighbors to your door, their eyes alight and envious. It's the first truly filling pot of porridge you've had in ages. You invite a couple of those nearest to share. It seems right, since we're all in this together. You make sure your children eat their fill, one full bowl each, before you even take a bite. The salted herrings you save for later. Who knows when such a treasure will come again? Having a little food in reserve eases your mind like balm. With slightly improved rations in early summer 1316, some people's health stabilizes a bit, but many are beyond saving by food alone. Sickness has taken root. The young man who returned from the failed London journey, Thomas's son, succumbed to his infected wound despite Father Bernard's herbal poultices. Others, already weak, begin to fall ill with diseases they'd normally fend off. Dysentery, the bloody flux, sweeps through in June when the weather warms, and sanitation in the village is at its worst. With hygiene impossible to maintain, everyone is too weak to haul waste or keep the water clean. The illness spreads like wildfire. It causes severe diarrhea, which is dangerous even in good times, let alone for the malnourished. Your daughter catches it, as do many children. She becomes a limp rag doll of a girl, dehydrated and moaning in pain. Your wife administers what simple remedy she knows, a tea of blackberry root and chamomile, and boiled water trickled carefully into her mouth to keep her hydrated. For 3 nights, you and your wife take turns dripping water into her mouth and praying over her frail form. At one point, her eyes roll back and you truly fear the end has come. But by some miracle, the fever breaks on the 4th day. Miraculously, your little girl pulls through, though others do not. Many of the very young and very old in the village perish during these warm months, their bodies too weak to fight the dehydration and fever that come with the flux. It's as if hunger laid the kindling and disease lit the fire. The combination scythes down the weakest among you. Your daughter survives, but she's left even more frail. You and your wife are not untouched by the flux either, but you only get mild bouts. Likely because you never had enough food in you for the sickness to really take hold. Dark humor there. Still, it leaves you even more dehydrated and exhausted. By midsummer 1316, any pretense of normal society is eroding. The Lord's manor is shuttered and quiet. Rumor has it the Lord and his family have fled to their other estate in the south, hoping to find better supplies there. If true, it means we are essentially left to fend for ourselves. On the one hand, it's frightening. No protection, no authority to keep order beyond our priest and a few aging village elders. On the other, at least the Lord's men aren't coming to take what little we have left. But something else begins to happen. Bands of strangers start appearing more frequently, and they're not peaceful refugees. They're raiders, plain and simple. Perhaps brigands, broken soldiers turned bandit, or just starving peasants gone rogue. In July, a group of such men attempts to ransack a nearby village. We get word when one badly wounded survivor from that village staggers into ours, warning that the band might head our way next. This news sends chills through everyone. We've all heard the horror stories, armed gangs butchering farm animals and farmers for food, even rumored cases of cannibalism on the roadsides. Could that really be true? The glint in the survivor's eye as he hissed, "They ate my neighbor, I swear it," leaves little doubt he believes it. Our remaining able-bodied men, and women too, those who can still hold a weapon, gather to prepare a defense. It's almost comical. A collection of skinny, ragged defenders wielding pitchforks, rusty billhooks, a couple of woodsmen's axes, and one or two old swords that has been gathering dust since someone's grandfather fought in a long-ago war. Yet, feeble as we are, we're fiercely determined not to let these predators take what little we have left. Hunger may have sapped our strength, but desperation grants a certain ferocity. Sure enough, one moonless night in late July, they come. Half a dozen shadowy figures slink into the outskirts of the village. But we've set lookouts, and a shout goes up. You grab your makeshift spear, a long knife tied to a stick, and rush into the chaos. Torchlight swings crazily as villagers dart here and there. You see the raiders more clearly now. They're gaunt as skeletons, eyes wild, hair matted. They might have been ordinary farmers once, but hunger has made them feral. The clash is brief and desperate. One raider lunges at you swinging a club. You manage to sidestep. He's slow, weakened by famine as you are. You jab with your spear and miraculously strike his side. He yowls and falls, clutching the wound. You're stunned at yourself. You, a peaceful farmer, have just stabbed someone. But there's no time to dwell on it. Another intruder is grappling with two villagers near the grain shed. Their likely target, a shed where a scant few sacks of barley and dried beans are stored under guard. You join the fray, whacking the raider with the butt of your spear. He's overpowered, and, after a struggle, surrenders when more villagers swarm him. Outnumbered and weak, the remaining raiders retreat into darkness, dragging their injured comrades with them. The one intruder you knocked down is briefly captured by the enraged villagers. Someone suggests hanging him at first light as a warning, but as the adrenaline ebbs, everyone is too exhausted and hollow-eyed to bother with execution. By dawn, the man has slipped his bonds and vanished. In truth, none of us have the energy or will to pursue vengeance. Survival is all we care about. In the aftermath, the village mood is grim. Violence like this was almost unheard of here in the past. Now it's kill or be killed for a sack of grain. As you wipe the blood from your improvised spear, your hands shake. You realize that the man you stabbed could easily have been you, if you had decided to roam as they did. Fate is thin, just a twist, and one can become either the desperate attacker or the desperate defender. Despite these trials, the Earth's cycles continue. Late summer brings the promise of another harvest. Those seeds you risked planting have grown, albeit meagerly. In August 1316, you and the remaining villagers gather whatever the fields have produced. To your relief, it's more than last year. Not a bounty by any measure, but enough that perhaps you won't starve this winter if carefully rationed. Perhaps you fill a few sacks with barley, oats, and peas. Many ears of grain are blighted or empty. Much of the oat stalks just produced straw with little seed. Still, you end up with something. But there's a catch. Because so many ate their seed or had none to plant, the overall communal harvest is still desperately small. And now, the Lord's steward returns to ensure the Lord gets his due. Postponed taxes or not, some obligation remains. A heated confrontation ensues in the village square when the steward demands a portion of the harvest. People shout that they'll die if he takes any. The steward, clearly uncomfortable, ultimately accepts a token payment, a single sack of grain and a few coins from those who somehow scraped together money, perhaps by selling a family heirloom in town. It's a pathetic offering, but he likely knows forcing more would spark revolt. He leaves with hardly a backward glance, off to wherever the Lord is holed up. Harvest time usually also means slaughter time. In normal years, one might butcher some livestock and salt the meat to last through winter. But there's virtually no livestock left. All the pigs are gone, eaten or died off. Most chickens ended in the pot long ago, and the cows that remain are needed for the tiny bit of milk they give to keep babies alive. Besides, with the ongoing salt shortage, evaporating salt from seawater is still difficult in this constant wet climate, and imported salt is hugely expensive. Preserving meat is problematic. Some who had animals earlier tried salting their meat only to have it spoil because the salt was too damp and weak. So there'll be no ham or smoked sausage in anyone's larder this year. Autumn 1316 sets in. It's harvest in name, but there's little festivity. Still, you allow yourself a moment of solace. One evening, after threshing barley, you secretly pocket a handful of grains and later parch them over the fire to share as a treat with your kids. The toasted kernels pop and crackle. The children crunch them slowly, each grain a burst of nutty flavor on their tongues. It's like giving them candy. Their eyes light up for the first time in months. The simplest thing, roasted barley, feels like a luxury. You and your wife exchange a soft smile as the children nibble and grin. For once, they go to bed with something in their stomachs beyond grass soup. As the leaves turn gold and brown, a strange rumor reaches your ears. Whispers of unspeakable acts in distant parts. Words like cannibal flit through the air in hushed, horrified tones. At first, you refuse to believe it. People eating people? No, that's just a tale to scare children, isn't it? Yet you recall that night the crazed woman clutched her mysterious sack, the haunted look in the traveler's eyes who spoke of it. And nearer, You recall poor Adam who tried to steal your soup. What might he have done if pushed even further? One dusk, you find out just how real it is. You're out in the woods checking traps for rabbits, mostly empty these days, when you smell something odd. A fire and a distinct cooking scent. Not unpleasant, actually rather savory, like roasting meat. Your mouth waters instinctively, but then your brain catches up. Who would be cooking out here in the forest? You quietly creep toward the smell, heart pounding. Peering through the brambles, you see a small encampment in a clearing. 2 figures huddled around a campfire, a kettle hanging over it. They're ragged, likely desperate vagabonds. One is stirring the pot. Then you see it, a human arm, unmistakably, sticking out of the pot. The hand and fingers clearly visible for a moment before the man pushes it back into the broth. A surge of bile rises in your throat. Your vision swims. You must have made a noise, because one of the cooks looks sharply in your direction. You stumble back, cracking a twig, then turn and flee as quietly as you can, terror lending you speed. You run and don't stop until you reach the edge of the village. Bent over, gasping for breath, you vomit violently into the bushes. Partly from exertion, partly from horror at what you just witnessed. You don't tell the others exactly what you saw, only that there are dangerous men in the woods, and we should avoid that area. You're not even sure how to process it yourself. The image of that arm in the pot will haunt your dreams, and yet that smell. You hate yourself for even remembering it fondly, but it smelled like a rich stew, like something delicious. That realization horrifies you further. Could I ever? You banish the thought immediately, praying you never reach that level of desperation. By the time 1316 draws to a close, it's clear that while this year gave a slightly better harvest than the last, the famine is far from over. Too many mouths, not enough food. Rationing is harsh and disciplined. Each day's portion is carefully measured. A bit of porridge, a piece of hard bread if you're lucky, some boiled herbs. It's a starvation diet, but it's just enough to keep you shuffling along. You've become a skeleton covered in skin. Your ribs could be counted from across the hut. You are haggard, your face sunken and your joints aching. But you are alive, which is more than can be said for perhaps half of those you knew from 1314. Somehow, alive. Your children and their generation, who endured this in their youth, grow up perhaps a bit smaller and more serious than those born in easy times. But they also appreciate community more. They saw neighbors save each other, or, sadly, harm each other. They learned early the value of sharing and the perils of selfishness. With winter coming again, another specter looms, famine's cruel companion, pestilence. There are reports of a great pestilence in nearby counties, a fever of some sort, wiping out whole families already weak from malnutrition. Some call it typhoid, others just plague. Though it's not the Black Death, that horror is still decades away. All you know is that starvation has weakened everyone, making even a common cold lethal. Father Bernard constantly prays for deliverance from disease. But if God didn't spare us famine, will He spare us illness? Christmas 1316 is even bleaker than the last. Many more familiar faces are gone. There are fewer voices to sing, fewer hands to work, fewer children laughing, most of them too weak or too gone. Yet, in the dark of winter, humans cling to ritual to survive mentally. Father Bernard does what he can to lift spirits. He and a few others venture out into the woods and manage to drag back a Yule log, an old tradition, a symbol of hope for the coming year. The log is enormous, almost too heavy for our weakened villagers to haul, but they manage. On Christmas Eve, the whole village gathers around the communal fire pit. With great effort, the log is set ablaze. For a moment, the flames roar to life, bright and golden, spitting sparks into the black winter sky. You feel a faint stirring of something in your heart as the heat washes over your cold skin. People trade half smiles. It feels almost normal. Someone begins to sing a carol, the old Latin hymn Adeste Fideles. O come, all ye faithful. A few voices join in, softly at first. You wrap an arm around your wife's shoulders, and she rests her head against you. In that flicker of firelight, with a familiar melody winding through the crisp air, you can almost believe that this nightmare will end. That next year might be better. The alternative, that next year might be worse, is too dreadful to voice. The Yule log burns through the night, and families huddle around it for warmth, sharing what tiny scraps of food they saved for this day. One neighbor roasts a crow he managed to trap. Another pours a thimble of weak ale, barely more than gritty water, to share in the tiny sips all around. It's the closest thing to a feast anyone will see this year. Despite the paltry fare, there's a feeling of solidarity. We're in this together, whispers that small fire. We will endure, says each softly hummed verse of the carol. As you carry your children home late that night, both asleep in your arms, you try to catch snowflakes on your tongue like you did as a boy. Perhaps one of those flakes will taste like manna from heaven, but they have no taste at all. Just a chill that quickly numbs your tongue. The year 1317 ambles in under a pale, hesitant sun. The landscape is bleak, fields scarred by floods, villages scarred by loss. You are alive, which is more than can be said for many who didn't survive the past 2 years. Thin, yes. Haggard, yes. But alive. By now, in the 3rd year of famine, you have adapted in ways you never thought possible. Hunger has become an unwelcome familiar, a constant companion that you almost know how to handle on a day-to-day basis. That doesn't mean it's easier, just that you're numb to it. You wake up, feel the emptiness inside, sigh, and carry on. The mind has learned to dampen the body's screams for food, at least enough so you can work. And work you must, because if there's even the slightest chance to coax life from the soil this year, you'll take it. As early spring approaches, you and the others prepare the fields again. It's an absurd sight. A handful of hollow-eyed farmers stumbling through furrows with plows pulled by the few remaining oxen. The ones miraculously still alive or newly acquired somehow. Actually, in some cases, humans pull the plow in place of missing oxen. You yourself strap in alongside 2 other men one day, chest heaving as you drag the iron blade through rain-softened earth. It's back-breaking labor, even for a healthy man. For you, it's pure agony. After 1 row, you vomit from the exertion and have to rest, shaking. But after a sip of water and a whispered prayer, you get up and pull again. Why? Because the alternative is empty fields and empty stomachs. This spring, the rains come again, but not with the same fury. It's still wetter than you'd like, but there are stretches of a few days where the sun actually shines. Hallelujah! On one of those bright mornings, you even hear a skylark trilling above the fields, a sound you haven't heard in what feels like ages. The simple trill of a bird brings tears to your eyes. It's proof that life, natural and unbothered, is carrying on and perhaps flourishing again. The seeds sprout in due time. Mid-spring 1317, the fields are looking decent. You hesitate to jinx it by saying, good, but honestly, compared to the last 2 years, it is good. There's plenty of patchiness and the crops are still somewhat weak, but they're not drowning. They're growing. You and the others weed and tend them meticulously, hands trembling from weakness but hearts clinging to hope. Now it's up to nature. Yet even as nature shows a hint of mercy, human woes persist. By now, the social order has fundamentally changed from before the famine. It's a more brutal world, one of suspicion and weariness. You've learned to guard your tongue and your goods carefully. Even once friendly villagers eye each other warily, an animal look born of competing for scraps. That initial camaraderie by the Yule fire last year sometimes gives way to spats over a handful of beans or accusations that someone stole someone else's turnip. Father Bernard works hard to keep peace and charity alive among us, reminding everyone that Christian virtue is tested most in times like these. Some listen. Others are beyond caring about sermons. The church itself is not immune to change. Once you obeyed the clergy without question, but after 2 years of unanswered prayers, you have moments of doubt. If God sent this trial, does He care how many rosaries we mumble? Some days you join the communal prayers, other days you skip. Either due to fatigue or quiet rebellion, you're not sure. You're careful not to show outright impiety. The last thing you need is people accusing you of inviting God's wrath. But you sense Father Bernard himself has crises of faith in private. He's aged a decade in 2 years, poor man, burying half his flock. Still, he remains a pillar, and in truth, his presence and persistence probably kept the village from disintegrating completely. By May 1317, food supplies are at an all-time low. It's the hungry gap. The last of winter's reserves are gone, and new crops aren't yet ready. Even with improved weather, these late spring weeks are among the scariest. People are just holding on, skin over bone. It's in this fraught period that the famine reaches its darkest chapter. The final circle of hell, it seems, opens briefly on earth. It begins with the disappearance. A little boy goes missing from the village one evening. He's the 3-year-old son of Marjorie, a widow who lost her husband last year. The boy was at Vespers with us. Several folks recall seeing him, but by nightfall he's nowhere to be found. Marjorie is distraught, screaming and searching everywhere. The village turns out to help, combing the wood's edge with torches and calling the child's name. He's too young to wander far. It's unlikely he just ran off. Whispers fill the air. Could he have been taken? But who would? Then someone remembers. That very morning, an unfamiliar man was seen passing along the road near the village. A ragged fellow, tall, with a limp, muttering to himself. A refugee or vagabond, no doubt. Could he have snatched the boy? For what purpose? A ransom? Marjorie is poor, no sense in that. An ugly alternative forms in everyone's mind, but few dare speak it. Finally, John the Miller bluntly voices what we're all thinking. He's not planning to ransom the lad. He's planning to eat him. A collective shudder. Marjorie wails and collapses. Immediately, a group of the strongest men, you among them, arm up and set out, hearts pounding with rage and fear. We follow what faint tracks we find in the mud, footprints of an adult and possibly a child's, leading into the woods northwest of the village. After about a mile, near a ruined charcoal burner's hut, we find them. Or rather, we find what remains. The boy's tiny body lies lifeless among the leaves. His arm is gone, crudely severed at the shoulder. The flesh on one thigh is also cut away. It's as if a butcher went at him. The savory scent of cooked meat still lingers in the clearing, turning your stomach as you fully grasp what that stew was. There's no sign of the vagabond. Perhaps your search party's approach scared him off. One of our party curses violently and vomits in the bushes. You stand there in shock, nausea twisting inside you. It's the first time you've seen the true face of famine's insanity up close. That someone would murder and carve up a child to eat. It's almost beyond comprehension, yet here it is, real and raw and unbelievably tragic. We carry the boy's remains, what we can gather, back to his mother. The village is plunged into a new kind of horror. Hunger and despair were terrible, but this is evil at the door. It's as if we collectively realize we're teetering on the brink of complete moral collapse. Many weep and vow vengeance on the killer, but he's vanished. Perhaps that's for the best. If caught, he'd be torn limb from limb on the spot. And after what he did, no one would object. That night, nobody sleeps comfortably. In the woods beyond the fields, wolves howl, a long, haunting chorus. Predators are venturing near our settlements, drawn by the scent of carrion from unburied livestock and the unguarded fringes of human misery. In better times, the village dogs and nightly watchfires kept such beasts away. But now, even the dogs are gone, lost to hunger or sacrificed for food, and few have the strength to tend fires till dawn. Hearing those wolf cries so close makes your skin crawl. It feels as if nature itself is circling in for the final kill. And, indeed, by the next dawn, a few more of your neighbors have slipped away in the night, their bodies simply too frail to continue. There's no bread to fortify the living, let alone wood to spare for coffins. So, a single trench is dug to lay 3 pale corpses to rest at once. Father Bernard, trembling with fatigue and grief, manages a short prayer over the common grave. There isn't even energy for proper mourning. As the earth is shoveled over, you can hardly shed a tear. Your heart feels as numb as your stomach. Father Bernard later records in the parish ledger a single devastating line, 1317. Our village starves. Lord, have mercy. Then, one day not long after, something shifts. The gray sky begins to lighten. Instead of constant drizzle, there are only scattered clouds. A timid sunbeam breaks through and touches your face, feeling oddly unfamiliar and warm. You tilt your head up, closing your eyes to savor it. Could it be? That afternoon, the rain does not return. Nor the next day. In fact, an entire week passes with gentle breezes and no rain at all. The dirt paths start to firm up. Puddles shrink. Tiny white and yellow flowers poke through the green shoots by the roadside, their petals opening hungrily to the sun. Villagers step outside and look at each other in cautious wonder, hardly daring to say it aloud. The weather has finally changed for the better. As the cold, wet weather finally abates, the famine reaches its height in early spring 1317. Ironically, just as hope glimmers. So many have died that coffins give way to mass graves and hasty prayers. The church bell tolls incessantly for the departed until Father Bernard's arm is too weak to pull the rope. In the parish register, he scribbles a grim note for posterity. Anno 1317. There was no food. Many of our flock perished of hunger. Yet now, finally, in the summer of that year, the weather patterns returned to normal. The constant rains that plagued 1315 and 1316 ease into a more typical mix of sunshine and showers. The fields, battered as they are, seize the opportunity to grow. By midsummer 1317, the crops stand taller and fuller than they have in years. They're not perfect. Patches of blight here and there, some areas of stunted growth, but many stalks are heavy with grain. The sun actually shines warmly more days than not. The village is cautious, afraid to celebrate too soon. But you can feel an unmistakable shift in the air, a sense that the worst is over. Food from last year's scant harvest has long run out, and starvation is still a daily reality. Yet there is food growing in the fields and gardens again. Now the task is simply to hold on until the harvest. Still, desperation pushes people to the brink before relief arrives. With nothing left to eat, some households resort to truly unthinkable acts. The incident with Marjorie's poor boy is the talk of every whispered conversation, a warning of how hunger can erase humanity entirely. Parents hold their children tighter at night. Neighbors eye every outsider with suspicion or outright menace. We post a guard at the village edges to chase away any solitary wanderers. A cruel turn, since we too once sent out wanderers, but fear now guides us more than pity. Some in the village quietly suggest that if any more outsiders appear, we ought to eliminate them before they eliminate us. Father Bernard vehemently opposes such talk. We must not become murderers, he insists. But the glint in a few eyes suggests that if a stranger showed up holding so much as a loaf of bread, violence might not be far behind. The thin veneer of civilization is stretched to breaking. As midyear passes, though, death loosens its grip. Fewer people are dying now than in the spring. Maybe those most vulnerable are already gone. Or maybe the prospect of an actual harvest is keeping everyone clinging to life just a little harder. The warm, dry weather itself improves spirits. We haven't seen the sun this much in years. People's skin loses that waxy chill. Some even manage to do a little hard labor without collapsing. By late July 1317, you're carefully rationing the very last of the 1316 grain to stretch until the new harvest. It's a thin gruel diet, but you know if all goes well, soon you'll have fresh bread. Real bread. That thought keeps you going. On one anxious afternoon in August, the first ears of barley turn golden and droop with plump grain. Harvest is upon you again. This time, a real harvest. The entire community, what remains of it, turns out to reap every precious stalk. There's no complaining of tired backs or blistered hands now. Everyone cuts and gathers with something almost like joy in their eyes. You head out with sickle in hand to your strip of the common field at first light. Your legs feel wobbly, partly from weakness, partly from anticipation. The golden heads of wheat sway gently. To you, they look like promises made tangible. Sickle in hand, you begin cutting. The wheat falls in swaths. You work slowly, you've lost so much strength, but you keep a steady pace. With each stroke, grain falls and hope rises. Others are singing a harvest song, cracked voices, but heartfelt. It's a song you haven't heard in years because no one had the spirit to sing it last year. All thanks to God who gives the grain, all thanks for sun and rain. The irony of thanking for rain is not lost on you, but you sing anyway. Stalk by stalk, bundle by bundle, the harvest is gathered. The yield is not great compared to times past, but there is grain to thresh, and that alone is cause for celebration. You collect perhaps 4 bushels of grain from your plot. In 1314 you had 8, but in 1315 you had barely 1, and last year 2. So 4 feels like fortune, similar modest gains across the village. When all the threshing and winnowing is done, Father Bernard insists on holding a special Mass of Thanksgiving. No one objects. Believers and skeptics alike attend, for this is as close to a victory as you've had in a long time. At that Mass, the loaves of the first bread from the new grain are placed by the altar. There are only a few small coarse loaves, but each household contributed a bit of flour to bake them. The aroma wafts through the little church, a perfume more divine than any frankincense. During the service, Father Bernard breaks 1 loaf and passes chunks around as a sort of communion. Normally, communion bread is a thin, tasteless wafer. This time it's hearty barley bread. Body of Christ, bread of life, he says tearfully, distributing it. To starving souls, this phrase has a very immediate, literal ring. You receive your piece and place it on your tongue. By God, it's good. Coarse and nutty and a bit ashy from the oven perhaps, but real, solid food. You chew slowly, every molar relishing the texture. It fills your mouth and stomach, and you almost sob in relief and gratitude. That night, the village holds a small bonfire in the fields, not a festive bonfire like those distant memories, but a signal that the nightmare is ending. People sit around it exchanging stories, not all sad, some surprisingly hopeful or absurd tales of what we ate or did to survive. There's laughter again, the sincere kind, when someone jokes about the outrageous recipes we tried. Remember when old Giles boiled his shoe leather and tried to eat it? Swore it needed salt. Aye, and he said it tasted like tough chicken. And we laugh because at the time it was tragic, but now it's a shared insane memory. There are somber moments, too, as we speak softly of those who didn't live to see this day. Many eyes drift to the corner of the field where a small cross was placed for Marjorie's little boy, and to the churchyard beyond, full of fresh mounds. We murmur their names and vow to remember them. In the following weeks, true recovery begins. The year 1318 brings an even better harvest, truly bountiful, almost as if the earth itself is apologizing for the nightmare it inflicted. Grain pours in from the fields, enough that after filling bellies there is seed to store, and even some left to sell. The barns that were empty for years smell of wheat and barley again. People actually sing while working in the fields during that harvest, tearful and joyous. The Great Famine has finally loosened its grip. That autumn of 1318, the village finally holds a real harvest feast once more. But it's a different kind of celebration than those of your youth. Along with the joy, there is solemn remembrance. Father Bernard organizes a memorial service in the church for all those lost during the famine. Everyone gathers, well-fed and dressed in their best, though many garments hang loose on bodies still recovering from the brink. The names of the departed are read aloud one by one, friends, neighbors, kin. As each name echoes through the nave, a candle is lit on the altar. Dozens of tiny flames flicker in remembrance. Far too many for such a small village. You stand with your arm around your wife's shoulders, bowing your head as your little ones place a candle for the baby sibling they lost in her womb last winter. Tears flow freely, but they are cleansing tears. After prayers, the church bells ring joyously, and the tone shifts to gratitude. Long tables are set up in the churchyard, laden with food, fresh loaves, salted pork, cheese, and late autumn fruits. It's the finest meal any of us has seen in years. Before anyone partakes, Father Bernard raises a cup of ale and offers a toast. To God's mercy and to our perseverance. May we never see such days of hunger again, and may we never forget those we lost, nor fail to help those in need. A murmur of agreement ripples among the villagers. Many make quiet vows to always set aside a portion of their crop for the poor or for emergency stores. Some suggest that this day of remembrance be kept every year, so that the village never forgets how fragile plenty can be. That evening, as the sunset paints the sky gold, you break bread, actual soft white bread, with your neighbors and family. Laughter returns, timid at first, then genuine. Children play chase between the tables, their shrieks of delight a stark contrast to the cries of despair that once filled these same streets. You sit, carving a slice of roast pork for your son, and catch yourself smiling at the mundane sight of a stray dog sniffing around for scraps. Even that scavenging animal is a welcome sign of normalcy, a far cry from the gaunt wolves of last year. In this moment, life feels whole again. The famine has become a memory, a dark tale to be told on winter nights. Its survivors now bonded by the unspoken understanding of what we endured together. Years pass, and you slowly rebuild, both your farm and your spirit. By the mid-1320s, the land yields almost as well as it once did. But the world is different. Your village is smaller. Some who left never returned, and those lost to famine left gaps that can't be filled. Even years later, there seem to be fewer children running around than before. The famine robbed an entire generation of its potential. Many who were young during those years bear lasting weaknesses, and some couples who buried their little ones never had the heart or health to try for more. It will take decades for the population to recover, if it ever truly does in your lifetime. Ironically, you find that those who survived now have a bit more land per person. There's more to go around with fewer mouths. But it's a hollow sort of prosperity. You'd trade it all to bring back those who died. You often catch yourself instinctively hoarding bits of food, even when there is no need. A crust of bread carefully saved, a carrot squirreled away, because some part of you can't shake the fear it could all vanish again. You and your wife become almost superstitious about never wasting even a crumb of bread. Remember 1315, you whisper, if a child ever complains there's nothing good to eat, and that is enough to silence them. The memory of starvation is etched in you like a scar that aches when a storm is coming. Sometimes, literally, when heavy rains return in any summer, you feel panic rising, your heart pounding until the sun comes out again and the crops survive. Every dark cloud makes you uneasy now. The famine taught you a profound humility in the face of nature. All the toil, all the planning, all the hierarchy of lords and kings. None of it mattered when the clouds decided not to part. You feel smaller but also wiser, and you cherish food like never before. Every meal, no matter how plain, is a gift. You savor the crunch of a crust, the sweetness of a carrot, the richness of a bit of bacon. Ah, yes, by the 1320s you have pigs again, and occasionally a slice of bacon. Not one bite is taken for granted. Sometimes when you're out in the field on a peaceful morning, you feel a wave of survivor's guilt. Why did you make it when others didn't? You think of Thomas's family, scattered or dead, of Marjorie, who sits by her son's grave every evening now, whispering to the wind, of Adam, the man who tried to steal soup. He was found dead in the woods later that spring of 16, a handful of mud in his mouth. The image haunts you, and you pray he found mercy beyond. So many stories ended. You can only honor them by remembering, by telling your children and grandchildren about the Great Famine, so they appreciate what they have. And, indeed, stories are already being told. Tales around the hearth about these hunger years, often embellished and turned into myth. You hear one evolving about a pair of siblings abandoned in a famine and a witch with a house of gingerbread, clearly inspired by events like the poor widow's children and that cannibal vagabond, though wrapped in fantasy. Another popular rhyme children sing. Little Johnny Thin and Small had no food, no teeth at all. A morbid nursery song that surely has its roots in this time. The truth that some parents did abandon children to reduce mouths to feed, and that some starving people did resort to unspeakable acts, is too harsh. Wrapping it in folk tales makes it easier to digest, in a way. Grim lessons for the future generation, disguised as fairy tales and rhymes. One crisp evening, many years later, you sit by your hearth, now warm and well-stocked, with a few of those future generation at your knee. Your grandchildren play at your feet, giggling and squabbling over toys. One of them pokes at her dinner of stew and turnips and pouts. I don't like turnips. At that, you feel a pang of memory. Setting aside your mug of ale, you decide it's story time. Did I ever tell you about the time when bread turned to mud and the skies cried too long? You begin softly, a familiar distant look in your eyes. They perk up, sensing a story. Was it like a war, Grandpa? Your older grandson asks, eyes wide. Worse, you say with a crooked smile. There was no enemy to fight, only empty bellies. The younger one, barely 5, crawls into your lap as you speak. Another interrupts. Did you ever eat a rat? Making a face. You grin. Aye, and I'll have you know, old rat wasn't half bad when you're starving. Ooh, they squeal in unison, half delighted, half disgusted. Then the oldest asks in a hushed voice, Did you see any monsters, Grandpapa? You pause, the image of that night in the woods flashing in your mind. I did, you say softly, though it wore the face of a man. The children fall silent, eyes like saucers. Satisfied that you have their full attention, and perhaps a tiny bit of healthy fear, you continue the tale in a low, dramatic voice. Why didn't the king send food? Your granddaughter interjects, brow furrowed with concern. You smile sadly. He wanted to, dear one. He tried. But even the king's cupboards were bare. He was just as helpless under that endless rain as the rest of us. The children exchange amazed looks. Imagining even a mighty king going hungry is almost beyond their comprehension. They fall quiet again as you delve back into the story. For a long while, you spin the dark yarn of 1315 to 17 to your rapt audience. You don't spare the grim parts, the boiling of moss, the wolves in the night, the boy who disappeared. The children hang on every word, clutching their blankets. By the end, one of them whispers, "Is it going to happen again, Grandpapa?" "No, my loves," you say gently. "Not tonight. We have a solid roof, a warm fire, and plenty of food. Those bad times are long gone." The children relax, smiles returning. "And I better not hear any complaints about turnips at dinner tomorrow," you add with a wink. They giggle softly and shake their heads. You kiss their foreheads and tuck the blanket around them. "Sleep tight," you whisper, standing by the door as their eyes drift closed. Grateful that these little ones will only ever know of famine as a story in the dark. You close the door and step outside for a moment. The night is calm. Stars fill the sky. You breathe in the cool air and let it out in a long plume. The nightmare is over. Before you drift to sleep that night, you murmur a prayer of thanks. Not a desperate plea like before, but simple gratitude for the ordinary miracle of a normal day. Waking up under a secure roof, eating your fill, and going to bed once more without fear or pain. And, as you close your eyes, you could swear you hear distant echoes of that time long ago. The rain, the cries, the prayers, and the hunger. But they are just echoes, ghosts of a past that, God willing, will never return in your lifetime. You pull the blanket a little tighter and sink into restful slumber, the specter of famine finally laid to rest at the edge of your dreams. Sleep tight. Now, you slowly drift back from the 14th century to your own warm bed. The nightmare of 1315 fades, and the reality of this comfortable moment sets in. You are not a starving peasant struggling to survive another day. You are a fortunate soul in the modern world, with food within reach, a roof that doesn't leak, and comforts beyond any medieval dream. You have clean water at the turn of a tap. You have light with the flick of a switch. Your doors and walls shield you from wolves and weather alike. In short, you live in a world where hunger is at bay, and safety is the norm. The blankets around you are soft, not damp burlap. Your kitchen, perhaps just down the hall, is stocked with snacks and breakfast for the morning. The mattress beneath you is soft and supportive, not straw and dirt, and the blanket enveloping you is warm and dry. Every fiber of your being can relax, because you do not have to worry where your next meal will come from. If you feel a slight hunger pang, you can simply tiptoe to the fridge or pantry and find something to nibble. Imagine having that magic box of plenty back in 1316. To say, "I'm starving today," is usually just an exaggeration, a casual joke when dinner is a bit late. In 1315, it was a death sentence. Recognizing that difference is enough to make anyone thankful for the era we live in. So, fluff your pillow one more time and pull your blanket close. In this moment, in this century, you are safe, fed, warm, and cozy. Let that comfort sink in. The rain outside, if it's raining at all, is just a soothing patter, not a prelude to disaster. The shadows in the dark are just shadows, not the specter of hunger. You have weathered a tale of rot, rain, and ruin, and thankfully, it was only a tale. Now, close your eyes and let yourself drift into a peaceful sleep with a thankful heart. You've seen how bad things once were, and how good you have it now. No monsters lurk in your cupboard, only the midnight snacks you might enjoy tomorrow. The century of hunger is over, and tonight you live in a time of plenty. Sleep tight and sweet dreams. Good night.